Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Unqualified Film Bros podcast. We are going through some Oscar nominees this week and next, and maybe beyond that, before we get to the ceremony in the first week of March. With that being said, let's dive on into The Brutalist. Brady Corbet directed, Adrian Brody stars with Guy Pearce and Felicity Jones. 3 hours, 35 minutes, including a 15-minute intermission. Gentlemen, what do you think?
I'll let
Pretty
Max
much.
start. He
Oh,
doesn't
I
know
Yeah,
where to
can
Max, you had
start.
you had some thoughts in the group chat. You go first.
I can start. I thought it was pretty wonderful, in a lot of ways. I think it was maybe you know, it was a little bit long, but I understand why it was. And I appreciated that it took the time to really make it sort of an epic of this march through time of searching for power. The opening shot of the upside down Statue of Liberty,
God, that's
um,
the shot of the year.
reminiscent of sort of the upside down and overturned American flag in times of crisis or in times of sort of fraught political times. Of course, we have a Jew coming over from the remnants of the Holocaust and the war in Laszlo, and he's searching for his place in America. And the first thing he sees is obviously from his perspective, but sort of this overturned idea of freedom, which is like a through line through the entire movie of this push, this tension between him looking for control in all of the different aspects of his life, whether that's his relationship with Erzsébet and his relationship with Van Buren, and his relationship with his architecture and his work, his career, whatever that might be. That's what really stuck out to me is like this the tension that he was and sort of what he was searching for and whether or not he really found it by the end of the film or not.
Do you think he did? Or is that
Yeah,
open to interpretation?
I think largely yes. I would, but
I think a
I,
lot's
I
open
think
to
it.
interpretations.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
open because yes, he got the sort of the showcase of the Biennale in Venice, but it was never his story that he told. It was Ershebet who was telling it for him. It was his descendants, people who lived on after him.
Yeah, and also his artwork, which is the
Hmm.
main theme. Um, Certainly like the passing of time and longevity of thing and the destruction of things. Um, and a lot of that is very brutalist. Like the film's themes are pretty much centered around, even though it's an architecture sort of ideology, the ideas are more philosophical in that you show what things are, they just are. You can dress something up and all that, but underneath, and they talk about foundation a lot in this movie, but underneath it all, there is someone there. And it's like you have Laszlo, who's this very true tortured soul, but he's always, people call him ugly. People say, what's wrong with your nose? Harrison at a point says, "Oh my God, you look terrible. You're dressed terrible," and all this stuff. And Harrison is the foil to that, which is like this very appearing nice, looks like he's actually trying to help Laszlo, dressed very sharply, really rich, and contrasted with his son, which we meet first, seems like, oh, this guy's kind of a genuine guy. And he even says, like, in his first thing, is like, if there's one thing you know about me, it's that I'm blunt. I'm honest. And the whole thing is just a facade because he's really just this brat, who has tantrums and things like that and complains about like there's a scene where he's complaining about Laszlo begging. Um, it's like he's just completely in his own world, self-centered, and the only reason he wants to like make this center is for something to like give to his mom or else, more to him. Like everything is his
Yeah,
legacy.
it's a celebration
And
of his
and
family.
it's similar. It's similar to Laszlo too, but his legacy is not him per se, but his artwork, his buildings. because the brutalist thing is like they just are. He's built them, and now they there they are, and you can see what they are. You can see the concrete. Everything's exposed. The materials aren't hidden. So what you see is what you get.
Yeah,
But I
it's
really
a
loved it.
nice
I thought it was awesome.
it's a really sort of fascinating contrast to have this theme of brutalist architecture throughout the entire film. Ben, what you just said, what you see is what you get, when everything about the relationship dynamics and the power dynamics among our three lead characters and even the supporting cast is so complex and layered, where motivations are unclear and vision for what's happening next is murky, I guess. Where these these characters are very three-dimensional in moving through this narrative, so that we can really focus in on the characters, because the themes of the architecture are very surface level. That allows us to sort of dive deeper into everything else. Were you guys as exhausted leaving the theater as I was?
Not
No,
really.
not exhausted. I
I felt
mean,
drained having watched this movie.
yeah, it's a long investment of time, but it's not
Yeah,
a,
it was emotional.
yeah.
But it's not like, I mean, I was there at the end. But it was, yeah, it wasn't really
I mean,
draining. I
I
mean,
was with it the whole time, but it was just I as soon as I got outside, I was like, wow, that was it hit hard.
well, it is an epic, and yeah, I mean, it's supposed to. So I guess that was achieved. But yeah, I don't have any issues with the runtime. I mean, my only issues with the runtimes in theaters have always been like, if you have to go to the bathroom, you miss part of the movie, and the
This movie
body can
avoids
only do
that.
so much. Yeah, so now you get like a nice in the middle. Everyone can last for the most part to an hour 45, and you get 15 minutes to do whatever, get a water. It's nice.
It was.
Um,
It was a welcome
and
surprise.
I do feel like the part two and part one and part two really they have their own themes, and I love the way that it was sort of separated, especially given that like the next time, the first scene that we see is them being reunited. It's like that separation of people, separation of time. It's an interesting way to do it. And I love that the intermission was an actual, it's part of the movie. They just have 15 minutes and even a clock going down on the picture. That's beautiful. That's wonderful.
It was. I was surprised at the absence of Felicity Jones for the entire first act. Like I
Yeah,
would have
well, I
thought the
mean,
reunion would have happened sooner, but it made sense narratively to have it at the start of the
yeah,
second act.
she
She's
sort
not
of
really
is there.
absent though.
Yeah, she's reading letters and sending him
True.
things, and so she's there. She's a present character, but it hits all that more emotionally. It's an uncompromised art. You're not just gonna like shove Felicity Jones in there if it doesn't fit with your
Right. And
story.
no, it made sense looking back on the film in its entirety.
But yeah, I think this movie is definitely like Laszlo, an uncompromised thing. It does exactly what it intended to do. And really, like we talked a little bit about how the themes in the film mirror brutalism, but even the way that it's like shot is very interesting. You've got very shaky movement in the beginning. It's almost like an honest camera movement. You know, it doesn't dress things up as much. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that. There's very creative shots too, but at times it definitely feels much more like you're sort of feeling the emotions of the characters themselves in the camera work, which is an interesting thing. Um, Even like, going from the carriage and going on the boat, all of the point of view shots where you're really moving with the characters. And I think the whole movie is sort of like you're moving in time with Laszlo. You're seeing his life, even if it's, it skips over portions. And we've talked about that before, how it doesn't work in Maestro. Here it works, because you're not really showing as much his life as much as his legacy, his art, his passions. It's much more what it is and not how this person got to be who he is necessarily. We know who he is, and he's sort of the most honest character in the movie for the most part.
Almost to a
Um,
fault.
yeah, I mean, he's not willing. He just says things to people's faces. He's like, Jimmy, Jimmy, come here. Yeah, everything ugly, that's your fault. Um, but yeah, it's really. I mean, I'm gonna have to watch it again to really dive deep into it. Sometimes it has the sort of I forget what the lines are called, but it's President Brutalist um, architecture, the little divots in between. And at times it's
Yeah.
like you see it in the shades, definitely in the shades at one point. Um, it very much mirrors the architecture of brutalism. It's a very cool shot. Um,
There are some shots in this, especially when they get deeper into the second act and we start seeing more of the completed structure of this community center, that almost felt, I don't know, out of place with the way the rest of the movie was shot. Like these wide landscapes with this structure being built were so, what's the word I'm looking for? Monumental in the scope of the movie
mhm.
that they really, really stood out to me as an impressive creative choice to show, like, yes, this is the core thing tying all these characters together and these years spent together. But it was just the whole film, but those shots in particular had just the most impressive look. It was
Yeah, I
really,
mean
really
it's his
well made.
life, it's Laszlo's lifeline to like his life in America. Like that's the thing that's keeping him, that's the thing that's keeping his family above water. That's their source of income. So he's pouring his heart and soul into it and literally his paycheck into it
Yeah.
as
I
well.
mean, I think it's more than just like it's not just a job for him. That's his life. And he was scared to do it in the beginning because Germans didn't like it. Um, and then when he sees that people had appreciated it, all of a sudden he dedicates everything to that. Um, and even with like the library, when he first gets that job, he's very, very much knows what he wants to do, even if other people would tell him otherwise.
And
Yeah,
walks out when it's clear that he's not going to get the respect. Like he walks out
Yeah.
immediately, pretty much when Guy Pearce walks in and says, "Get out." He's like, "Okay, not going to fight you."
It's like
All right,
I'm
we're
done.
done.
I did
yeah,
That's
my
it.
thing.
that's it.
Yeah.
You don't like
But
it, you
he
got to deal
sees
with it.
the
I'm
way
done.
that the Van Burens are reacting around him to him building this monument to themselves, right? It's not even, it's going to have their name on it. It's not going to have Laszlo's name on it. He's just going to be the guy that built it. And then
Yep.
also, you have to build a church in it too, because that's how we can get public funding. But that wasn't part of your original plan because we have to add another building to it now. That's four in one instead of three in one or whatever it was before. Like he didn't really have a choice, but that was his livelihood. That's what he needed that's he needed it.
Well, I also thought it was interesting how we this whole thing starts with the building of a library in the Van Buren's home, and then when they're years later putting together what this community center will be, you've got the auditorium, you've got the gymnasium, you've got the library, and you've got the church, and then accidents happen, the railroad explosion chief among them, and the budget being what it is, the first thing to go is the library. And just to see Laszlo's reaction to that compared with how sort of standoffish and aloof the Van Burens are about that decision, when it's clearly so far removed from what Laszlo had envisioned for the project, also bringing in the other architect for creative consulting was another sort of knock against, not knock against, but it was another slight against Laszlo's vision for the project.
Well, yeah,
That
I mean,
he just keeps taking hits.
well, you sort of see like everything goes through Harrison, and Harrison appears very genuine in the beginning, but then you realize just how, like, especially when they said that, oh yeah, all this stuff was changed last month. You're just now hearing about it. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, this was approved by Harrison. And also you see Harrison's like slimy tendency after the railroad crash where Laszlo's like, all right, well, can we go there? Can we, salvage anything? And he's just like, oh, they might die. It's like, send flowers. Oh, wait, no, that'll seem guilty. It's like trying to appear some way. And that goes back to the theme. It's like Laszlo's very pragmatic. It's like, all right, can I do anything about this? And he's trying to, make sure he appears like he's not in the wrong.
right. That's his entire motivation throughout the entire film is to preserve his legacy and his family's legacy as these benevolent, wealthy, good people.
Yeah. But it's an interesting idea of, I mean, plenty of people have done it, but the
And
ugly man underneath.
that's something else that Harrison does even at the beginning of the film by taking Laszlo on as his architect for the project and live in and he lives on the grounds. His live-in architect is essentially to Harrison, even though it's not really revealed until later on, it's a charity case. It's look at this immigrant, this Jewish immigrant who escaped from the Holocaust coming to America, and oh, I'm giving him an opportunity in the
I
United
would say
States.
it's even more than a charity case. It's a pet project for him because they keep talking about how
Yeah,
Harrison is obsessed with architecture, obsessed with all this stuff, but he's really a talentless guy. Like he's got no ideas of his own. He's really stupid when it comes to architecture, and he listens to everything Laszlo tells him. But in return, he like wants him as his own pet, just to be like, this is the great Laszlo. It,
tough.
Toth, Toth, yeah.
And I'm
And
going to bring your family here so that you're stuck here even more, right? So
yeah,
you have
it's
them
very much
dependent
like
on you. Yeah, and then it culminates in the marble caves in Carrara, right? And
yeah,
that's like
where
the
he really
ultimate
like
act of domination and control. Because he
yeah.
sees Laszlo, he's comfortable in this environment. This is his friend that he's
Hmm.
worked with for years on past projects. And I don't like that he showed up late and that things aren't on my terms for once, and I'm not in control of the situation, so I'm going to take back control. And that's what happens is he rapes him and takes back control over the relationship for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. And you already see that start when like he brings his wife and he makes the joke of the penny and he like flips a penny to him and he's like, "Oh, actually, no, give that back." He
And
makes
he's
him
saved.
pick it up and give it back.
Mhm.
Yeah, obviously, making fun of him being a Jew. But yeah, he doesn't really have a choice at a certain point. It's like he's in love with the project, but also he's, you know, in a prison because of it. Always under Harrison's watch. And then after that scene where he does get raped, he's kind of, you see him sort of emotionally unraveled. He's angry and all this stuff. And you get the sense that that's because he's working on a project for a guy that raped him. And that's the only time where you see him unwilling to be really honest with himself. Um,
And it bleeds into his relationship with Ursabet a lot in the last part of this movie, where he's got all these problems with Harrison and with himself, but they're manifesting in the wrong place, which is it's an uncomfortable relationship dynamic for her. And she, we see in Felicity Jones's performance how that strains the relationship. It's difficult for her. And finally it's too much and she goes to confront the Van Burens.
Yeah, I mean, she's seen through the Van Burens from the start. You could see how
yeah,
she acclimated so almost instantly to their lifestyle, sitting out by the picnic by the lake in the picnic. Um, as her daughter is also, it's implied that she's sexually assaulted as well, by Harry.
Yes.
But you know,
Niece.
she niece, yes, yeah, niece. But Ershebet, she picked up on their malintentions almost immediately from the first time she sits down to lunch with them or dinner or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And she's trying to pull Laszlo in her direction of, okay, how can we use this to our advantage to sort of move ourselves up in the world too, even though she knows that it's bad, and that they're taking advantage of him. But he just, he never quite gets there. Um,
Well, there's the other thing where it's like his nice house, guest house, is much better than where he was sleeping and homeless shelters and where been there, kind of like small apartment in New York. It was very luxurious for somebody, just coming off the boat to be given all of that. And, that's kind of like the aspect of control. It's like you're given a lot, but a lot is taken. Um, I do especially love the marble scene because that there is that wide shot where you look at the marble one last time. Laszlo's looking at it, and there's like a little opening, um, like you can see it almost like it's a natural
The,
brutalist.
all of the shots of the quarry were just gorgeous.
Yeah, but I thought that one thematically just very, very
Oh,
good,
absolutely.
especially
Yeah.
given what happened the night before.
Yeah. So, the elephant in the room with this movie, and something that might impact its candidacy in the Academy Awards coming up in
I'm
about a month.
pretty sure they're already candidates, but
I mean, impact its position, it might impact voting.
yeah, maybe.
The
Probably
use of
not.
artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so I looked it up, and I mean, for the most part, I think that people have the wrong idea with AI. It's like we should be against generative AI, but people have been using AI for like film for a long time, at least as long as AI has been out. Like Denis
Yeah,
Villeneuve used it
it's
for camera work.
it's not
It's just
used here to write story. It's not used
no.
to make performances or make backgrounds or whatever.
And even the
It's
source like voice lines are from the guy doing it. It was a Hungarian guy that like recorded himself to use for the AI. So
right.
I
And
mean,
for
the,
those of
the
you out
problems that
there,
I
unfamiliar with what we're talking about, um, Brady Corbet and the production team behind this film used artificial intelligence to make the Hungarian accents for Laszlo and Urshabet.
not the Hungarian accents. It's speaking Hungarian. That's it.
Oh, it's a speaking Hungarian. My
No, no,
mistake.
the accents aren't. That's authentic. The only thing they used it for was when they spoke Hungarian.
I
And
They
must have
also
misread it.
used it,
Maybe I don't
they
know what I'm
also
talking
did use
about.
it to design some of the renderings and the drawings of some of the architecture and like some of the in the profile that Laszlo put together and everything too. I think that's also where part of the controversy is coming
yeah, yeah, I
from.
did see that.
And I
I
think
missed
That
that
that.
honestly, I think that's a more valid criticism
that that's
than,
that's
but
one that
it's also, I think it's not, I'm not gonna make the biggest stink about it, but I think that's a more valid criticism because it's about the movie's about architecture and art and everything, and I think it'd be easy enough to get an artist to draw up some renderings or whatever with, but
yeah,
whatever.
I have to look
It doesn't like
into it
ruin
because
the
like
film.
the other thing that I think people don't understand is AI. Like a lot of people are worried about AI taking other work and like regenerating it or using that. So I mean, for the accent, they used you know unique new things. So I wonder if they just sort of fed previous architecture drawings. I mean, I don't know how much they've said about it, but like it looked pretty damn good. Then again, it's just brutalism, so it's just lines. But
But still,
um,
you're right. It didn't like I went in knowing a little bit about the controversy, obviously not as much as I thought, but it didn't
yeah,
impact
I remember seeing
my
that now.
viewing. It didn't impact my viewing of the movie at all.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, if you
so
walked into this movie without knowing anything about it, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
right, but even looking for it, and maybe I was looking for it in the wrong place, considering I was looking for it in the accents rather than the speaking of the language. I didn't. It didn't stand out to me.
Yeah, I feel like as long as the goal is to be, appreciative of the arts, like not necessarily stealing from people, but you could feed AI new things and have it do something more accurately. I mean, that's like for the camera work and Dune, that's what they did to make sure the shots looked even better. Um, and it's one of these weird things where it's like technology has advanced so much through, the years. And AI is definitely the scariest one, but people had issues with like CGI back in the day, taking work away from, practical effects artists. There's always going to be that backlash, but you can't escape the fact that AI is out there. I think you got to use it so that it's artistic, but I don't
But
have as much of an issue using it.
that was one of the big sticking points in the dual strikes a year and a half ago from
Yeah, and
the
that's what I mean. It's like
writers.
that was mainly
Protections
about
against AI.
that. Yeah, but that was mainly about their work being fed to AI, their likeness being, generated. If you're choosing to make new things and feed it to AI, I don't really see that as anything other than just using technology. I mean, you shouldn't generate it to write scripts. I think those would be bad anyway. But my main test is like I feel like you should be able to tell whether it's good art or not. And I don't think AI can make good art. You can use it, but just like, good special effects don't make a movie, cough cough the creator. Um, you should be able to see whether a film has like true artistic intentions, and this one very clearly does. I mean, there's way too much going on. And also, I feel like people should stop focusing on independent movies that use AI because they're the only ones who have the excuse of they may have run out of funding.
Yeah, this was
If
made for
it,
$10 million, so
yeah, I mean that's insane. Like a 3.5 hour movie of this quality for under 10 million, they said.
yeah.
That's nuts because it was produced. It was independently made by Brady Corbet. So he put his entire paycheck on there. Um, and it was a similar thing with like Late Night with the Devil had a similar thing, but those are independent movies with low budgets. Those are not the things you should be worried about. When Marvel uses AI or something like that, then you should run and scream and
Cough,
yell at
cough,
things.
secret
Those
invasion.
guys, yeah, those guys have like that TV show cost like $200 million, and they used AI for the intro.
I'm
That's
pretty sure one episode of Secret Wars costs more than the entire budget
yeah,
for The
like
Brutalist.
that is bad. That
Like,
means that there's just not an artistic vision. You're wasting money. You're hurting artists. Just nonsense. So obviously it's a case by case thing, but in this case, I think I understand the architecture one. Yeah, that is, you know, a knock. The Hungarian accents, I'm going to say, is completely fine because their intent was to make it, as they said, they sound very good by themselves, but they wanted to make sure it sounded like a local,
Yeah,
wouldn't be able to
the
tell.
goal was authenticity, and that's achieved.
Yeah.
It's still duly so the subject of controversy
Yeah. And anything
because of
AI
how
will
hot a
be.
topic AI is in this industry right now.
Yeah, I just think sometimes people get a little too like gung ho and reactive about
I'm
stuff.
worked up about it.
When it's yeah, I mean, always be vigilant. It's always good to make sure, but the main thing I think is make sure the artists get credit for their work. It's
Right.
like when AI is taking from other artists and regenerating it, that that's stealing, in my opinion. If you're using AI again, like just feeding it new things that you got, feeding it, random drawings and sketches and say, do something like this, but a little different. Um, I have less of an issue.
So before we go,
Obviously, yeah, I wanted to talk about the epilogue, though, one of the
yes,
coolest things.
I wanted to get into that too. Go ahead.
Um, so, well, as to talk about, I know people don't like brutalist buildings, and people typically tear them down first these days. But I thought it was really interesting to see, all the architecture. um, on display at that event with music. You've had all the music in the 40s, 50s and stuff. Then you go to the music in the 80s, you see the different camera work, but the buildings are still there and they haven't changed. And I think that is one of the coolest things. At first I was like, what's happening here? But then I understood it. It's like all this time has passed, but those buildings are still there.
That's pretty damn
Yeah,
cool.
loved it.
Yeah,
Cool.
I have many thoughts, but I gotta watch the movie again because it's long and I can only remember so much.
At some point, we're gonna have our very well paid editor go through all of the episodes we've done and find all the times Ben has said, I need to see it again to form more clear thoughts, because I think we're probably at a couple dozen by now.
Well, I mean, everyone should watch a movie that challenges them more than once. You don't need to watch a
Megalopolis.
Marvel
I
movie more
agree.
than once to like get the gist. But
You're right.
yeah, sometimes it requires.
Megalopolis.
Megalopolis,
Megalopolis.
I put that
You
one on
did
the
say
docket.
you did say on that episode that you were gonna
I'm
watch
I'm
it a second
I'm gonna
time.
watch it again. Maybe I'll watch it. It kind of works with the architecture theme.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
does. I
He
mean, he is
doesn't,
an
and
architect.
time. He's talking
Yeah.
about time. It isn't stopping it.
that's a hell of a double feature, The Brutalist and Megalopolis.
I can't believe they both came out the same year. That's and independently funded. The Megalopolis cost 10 times as much.
Yeah.
And Coppola paid for all of it.
Yeah, and he sold his vineyard to pay for it. The poor guy's got to be
Oh
in
man.
debt.
All right.
Uh,
The Brutalist is an excellent film. It's an investment that is well worth your time, your money, your effort. It's worth your thought multiple times, as Ben has said.
yeah,
Um, check it out. It's playing in a lot of theaters, and it will be well represented at the Academy Awards in about 5 weeks or so, 4 weeks. Um, a lot of acting nominations, nominated for Best Picture, nominated for Best Director. It's a hell of a movie. Check it out. We will see you for another Oscar Best Picture nominee next week, the seventh film in Academy Awards history to be in the horror genre and nominated for Best Picture. We are talking about The Substance, Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. We'll see you next week. Have a good night.
Good night.
and